When my son looked me in the eye and said, "David's my real dad," I didn't argue. I nodded, paid the dinner bill, and walked out of his life for the second time. That night, I deleted every photo I had of us camping together. I didn't cry. I didn't drink. I made a spreadsheet. By Christmas, I had stopped sending anything but the court-mandated child support. No more surprise birthday gifts. No more weekend road trips he always canceled last minute. I became the ghost they had already buried. I watched a stranger post pictures of my kids calling him Dad, while I was blocked from even commenting. When I tried to reach out to my daughter, she responded with a single word, "Please." That was it. Please stop. Please disappear. Please die quietly. They replaced me, and I paid them monthly for the privilege. But something changed when I found the old voice memo. It wasn't meant for me. It was meant for her friend. And it contained the one truth that broke the illusion. Before we dive into this story of betrayal, silence, and justice served without a single raised voice, I need you to subscribe and stay till the end. Because what happens when a father becomes a ghost and then decides to haunt the living? Let's find out. My name is Mark, and I used to think that love meant providing. I was 48 when it finally hit me that I had spent most of my children's early lives trying to buy time I never had the courage to give. Back then, I was a financial advisor working for a top-tier firm in Chicago. 14-hour workdays were normal, not exceptions. I left home before sunrise and came back long after my kids had gone to bed. My phone was always buzzing, my calendar always full. My suits were pressed, my shoes polished, and my clients rich. On paper, I was a success. In real life, I was a stranger in my own house. I told myself it was temporary. Just a few more years, I'd say. Once we pay off the house, once we get ahead, once I make partner. Every milestone was supposed to unlock more family time, more freedom. But time doesn't accumulate like savings. You either spend it or lose it. I was too blind to see I was bankrupting something I could never replenish. Linda, my ex-wife, used to ask for small things. "Can you take Emily to school just this Friday?" Or, "Michael wants to show you his science project tonight." I always replied with the same line, "I've got meetings. I'll make it up to them this weekend." The weekend would come, and I'd be catching up on quarterly reports or networking events. I told myself I was working for them. But the truth was, I was hiding behind work. It was easier to pitch stocks to strangers than face the awkward silence at my dinner table. I wasn't abusive. I wasn't absent in the legal sense. I paid the bills, attended birthdays, showed up for major events. But I was emotionally unavailable. I wasn't the dad who read bedtime stories or helped with homework. I was the dad who transferred funds and nodded during parent-teacher conferences. I thought kids were resilient. I thought Linda understood. She never yelled or accused me outright, but her eyes said everything during those late-night talks we barely had. I remember one evening, she sat on the edge of our bed and said, "They don't need your money, Mark. They need their father." I nodded and went back to my laptop. Years later, when we finally separated, it wasn't dramatic. No affair. No yelling. Just silence that had solidified into a wall between us. We signed papers like business partners dissolving a contract. I moved into a furnished apartment downtown. She kept the house. We agreed on joint custody, but it was more theoretical than real. I had my weekends, but the kids were often busy or not feeling up to it. I didn't fight it. I thought it was temporary. That first year post-divorce, I buried myself in work even deeper. I told myself I needed the distraction. I upped my monthly child support voluntarily, sent extra for holidays, and wired money for summer camps. I thought I was being a good father in the only language I knew. Transactions. I started noticing the shift slowly. Emily stopped texting back. Michael stopped calling me dad and just used my name. I figured they were adjusting. Teens go through phases. Linda told me not to worry, that it was normal. I believed her, like I always had. But normal doesn't feel like this. Normal isn't watching your daughter post Father's Day photos with another man, captioned, "the best dad in the world." Normal isn't being blocked from your son's Instagram while his stepdad is in every picture. Looking back now, I can see it clearly. I wasn't replaced overnight. I was replaced inch by inch. With every moment I wasn't there, every recital I missed, every story I didn't listen to. I had handed over the keys to someone else, not maliciously, but through negligence dressed as hard work. The years I thought were investments were actually withdrawals. And by the time I tried to reconnect, the account was empty. The divorce was quiet, almost sterile. There were no dramatic confrontations, no slammed doors or custody battles. Linda and I signed the papers with the efficiency of two people finalizing a long-expired business deal. We agreed on shared custody, but in practice, she became the primary parent, and I became the man who sent money. Linda never outright said I couldn't see the kids. She wasn't cruel, not in the obvious ways. She was civil, even polite. But something in her tone, in her silences, made it clear. My presence was more of a disruption than a contribution. Michael has a game this Saturday, but he's already used to David coaching him, she once said, voice flat but firm. Or, Emily's got a dance recital, but she's nervous. Maybe next time. There was always a reason, always a suggestion that my appearance would only make things harder for them. I didn't argue. I felt like I didn't have the right to. After all, hadn't I created this distance? Wasn't I the one who missed the recitals and bedtime stories? Who buried himself in quarterly earnings while Emily learned to ride a bike without me? Who canceled on weekend camping trips so often that Michael eventually stopped asking? So I paid. $2,000 a month, like clockwork, never late. Never short. Birthdays, I sent extra. Christmas, I wired a bonus. When Emily got the flu and needed a specialist, I paid the bill within the hour. When Michael broke his arm, I sent money for a new cast cover and a Lego set, but no amount of money ever got me a thank you call, or even a selfie with the gifts. The silence was louder than any rejection. Every transaction felt like shouting, "I love you," into a canyon and waiting for the echo that never came. Guilt is a strange currency. It makes you overpay for things that can't be bought. I started sending handwritten cards with the payments, short notes like, "Hope your recital goes well," or "So proud of your grades." Linda never acknowledged them. The kids never responded. I wasn't sure they even saw them. I remember one evening, I asked Linda, "Do they read my notes?" She paused for a second too long and then said, "They're teenagers, Mark. You know how they are." I didn't. Not anymore. I convinced myself this was just a phase, that teenagers were moody, that life after divorce was naturally awkward. I told myself to be patient, to keep doing the right things, to trust that love, even unspoken, would eventually return. But each month, the distance grew. I went from being their father to being a funding source. I wasn't invited to Emily's Sweet 16. Michael's basketball championship came and went without even a text. Still, I didn't push. I didn't show up uninvited. I didn't demand my time. I thought that would only make things worse. I remembered my own father, how he tried to force his presence into my life after he left, how I resented him for it. So I stayed in my lane. I built a schedule around the transfers, first of each month, support payment, middle of the month, allowance for school stuff, holidays, Amazon packages, prepaid gift cards. I added reminders to my calendar like they were business tasks. I became efficient at fatherhood from a distance, efficient and invisible. And yet, the guilt never left. I felt it most during the quiet moments, when I passed by a father hugging his daughter at a grocery store, or when I saw an old home video on my phone of Michael laughing at age 5. Back then, I was still Dad, not Mark, not the guy who sends checks. Sometimes I wondered if Linda even realized how much it hurt. Maybe she thought she was protecting them from disappointment. Maybe she believed it was best to let them detach slowly. Or maybe she was angry in ways she never voiced. I don't blame her for being the one who stayed. She raised them. She handled the hard days, the sick days, the heartbreaks and triumphs. She was there, and I wasn't. But presence isn't always parenting, and absence doesn't always mean apathy. I love them. I still do. But love, without proximity, without memories to anchor it, begins to feel like a story someone else told you about your own life. And that's what I had become. A story they barely remembered. For a while, I told myself things were fine. Not great. Not how they used to be, but stable. I believed I was doing the right thing. Staying consistent, respectful, generous. I wasn't fighting with Linda. I wasn't missing payments. I wasn't forcing the kids into uncomfortable situations. In my mind, this was redemption. This was how I made peace with the past. I bought into the illusion that quiet meant okay. I'd text Michael on Saturdays, "How's the game today, champ?" No reply. I'd send Emily links to books I thought she'd like. Nothing. Sometimes I'd get a read notification. Sometimes not even that. But I never double texted. I didn't want to seem desperate. Every now and then, Linda would send a photo. Michael at a science fair. Emily dressed up for Halloween. No captions, no follow-up. Just digital proof they were alive, growing, and moving on without me. I clung to those pictures like postcards from a country I wasn't allowed to visit. One day, about a year after the divorce, I ran into Emily and her friends at a bookstore. She didn't see me at first. She was laughing, carefree, in a way I hadn't seen in years. I hesitated, unsure whether to approach. Then one of her friends glanced over and asked, "Who's that?" Emily looked straight at me and said, "Oh, that's Mark. My mom's ex." Mark. Not Dad. Not even a polite, "my father." Just Mark. Her friends nodded casually, and the conversation moved on. I stood there, rooted to the spot, holding a book I no longer remembered picking up. That night, I opened a folder on my desktop labeled Kids. Inside were pictures from birthdays, holidays, school plays, moments I had managed to capture. I scrolled through them like a man flipping through old investment statements, trying to understand where the losses began. I started noticing a pattern I hadn't seen before. In recent photos, David, Linda's new husband, was always present. At first, just in the background, then standing beside them, then with his arms around them. At Emily's middle school graduation, he was the one adjusting her cap. At Michael's birthday party, he was the one holding the cake. I wasn't in any of those pictures. Not one. I told myself not to read too much into it, that kids adapt, that David was a good guy, that maybe, just maybe, this was temporary. But deep down, I knew better. I wasn't being co-parented. I was being phased out. Still, I didn't confront Linda. I didn't ask for more time or demand explanations. That would have felt like an intrusion, like I was pushing back into a space I had forfeited. Instead, I leaned further into quiet support. I increased the monthly allowance. I sent care packages. I gave without asking. It was easier to believe that love could be felt through consistency than to face the truth that my presence no longer mattered. One evening, I called Michael just to hear his voice. The phone rang 4 times and went to voicemail. His message had been changed. "Hey, you've reached Michael and David. Leave a message." I hung up before the beep. Michael and David. I was no longer the man he aligned his identity with. I was a footnote, a donor, an echo. I kept telling myself that kids go through phases, that they rebel, that they pull away. But it didn't feel like rebellion. It felt like removal. And the worst part? I didn't even know who was orchestrating it. Linda never said a word to suggest I wasn't welcome. David never spoke to me directly. The kids never told me to back off. They just stopped showing up. There's something especially cruel about being erased without confrontation. No battles, no fights, just the slow, systematic withdrawal of affection until you're left holding receipts and memories that no one else remembers. I had confused their silence for peace. But peace without presence is just absence dressed in politeness. And I was starting to see the difference. It started with a bike ride. I was scrolling through Facebook on a Sunday afternoon when the picture appeared. Michael, grinning from ear to ear, helmet slightly crooked, riding along a forest trail. Behind him was Emily, hair pulled back in a ponytail, face flushed with laughter. And standing in the middle, one hand resting on each of their shoulders, was David. They were posing in front of a wooden sign that read, Blackwood Pines State Park. That place wasn't just another camping site. It was our place, mine and Michael's. I took him there every fall since he was 7. We pitched tents, burned marshmallows, and had our annual father-son photo in front of that exact sign. Except this time, I wasn't in the picture. David was. He wore a flannel shirt like I used to, and his arm curled around Michael in the same way I once did. He even held up the same 2-finger peace sign Michael and I used to do together. It wasn't just familiarity. It was replication. I stared at the photo for several minutes, trying to process what I was seeing. The caption read, "Perfect weekend with my world. Thanks, David, for being the rock we didn't know we needed." Linda's words. The rock. Not just a husband. A father figure. The father. I felt something twist in my gut. Not rage. Something quieter. Heavier. Like being slowly buried under something you can't stop. That image didn't just show joy. It showed replacement. And worse, it showed comfort with that replacement. I clicked through the rest of the album. Dozens of photos. David teaching Michael to fish. David roasting marshmallows. Emily resting her head on his shoulder near a campfire. In one short video, Michael turns the camera toward David and says, "Dad, tell them about the raccoon story." Dad. I watched it 3 times, just to be sure. There was no sarcasm, no correction, just effortless familiarity. I hadn't heard Michael call me Dad in over 6 months. A week later, Emily posted a collage on Instagram. It was for Father's Day. The title, "To the Man Who Stepped Up When He Didn't Have to." 4 pictures of David, coaching Michael's team, building a bookshelf with Emily, smiling with a birthday cake. Not a single mention of me. I didn't comment. I didn't even like the post. I just stared at it, wondering how long this had been happening. Not just their bond, but the quiet removal of mine. Linda hadn't told me she'd remarried. I found out through a tagged photo. A casual shot of her and David at a charity event, both wearing matching navy suits. Someone had commented, "Mr. and Mrs. Carter make such a power couple." Carter, David's last name. Linda had taken it. It was a detail that shouldn't have hurt, but it did. The next weekend, I texted Emily, "Hope your math test went well. Want to grab dinner sometime this week?" She didn't reply. 2 days later, I received a message from Linda. "Please don't pressure the kids if they don't respond right away. They're adjusting to a lot right now." Adjusting. I had been adjusting for 2 years, living in a 1-bedroom apartment with framed photos no one cared about but me. I'd adjusted to silence, to rejection, to watching my children grow through filtered snapshots. David, apparently, had adjusted quite well. I Googled him one night. David Carter, high school football coach, volunteer firefighter, recently awarded a local community leadership plaque. His school's blog had an article titled, "Coach Carter, Building More Than Just Athletes." The quote beneath his picture read, "Family isn't about blood, it's about showing up." I wanted to scream, because I had shown up, just not in the ways they needed, or maybe not in the ways they remembered. I had paid for every orthodontist appointment, every school trip, every laptop and late-night Uber ride. I had shown up with money, with letters, with cards and quiet love. But love doesn't leave footprints when no one wants to see them. Meanwhile, David was leaving big visible ones and wet concrete. I began noticing more subtle shifts. Emily stopped signing her emails. Love, M. Now it was just her name. Michael's voicemail now included David's voice in the background, shouting, "Mike, phone." Linda's emails started ending with, "We'll let you know," instead of, "I'll talk to them." We. As if my children were now a package deal with a new family. As if I was the outlier. And I started wondering, not whether I was losing them, that much was clear, but whether I already had. It was never loud, never aggressive. Just a quiet tide that pulled me farther and farther from the shore of my children's lives. I once believed erasure had to be dramatic. A door slammed, a name shouted in anger, a legal order. But real erasure, the kind that lasts, the kind that works, is slow, methodical, invisible to outsiders. Linda was never overtly hostile. She didn't badmouth me to the kids, at least not directly. Instead, she mastered a language of subtle suggestion, the art of rewriting memories without ever raising her voice. "Your dad's probably busy, sweetheart," she told Emily when I didn't make it to a last-minute school recital. "Let's not bother him with small things. He has a lot going on." "Mark travels a lot for work," she told Michael's teacher, loud enough for her son to overhear. "It's hard for him to commit to anything consistent. David usually steps in." No lies, just selective truths. Over time, those words became beliefs, and those beliefs became the framework of my children's understanding of me. At a parent-teacher event I wasn't invited to, Linda introduced David as the kid's dad, not stepdad, not Linda's husband, just dad. Michael's science fair project had a dedication label. To Dad, for helping me build this. It wasn't my handwriting. It wasn't my name. And I didn't even know he was entering. David had bought Michael a digital watch for his birthday. Sleek, athletic, with a customized engraving on the back. Proud to be your dad. Love, D. Michael wore it every day. When I saw it on his wrist during a rare coffee meetup, I tried to smile. Nice watch, I said. Yeah, he replied, not even glancing up. Dad gave it to me. I opened my mouth, then closed it. The silence was heavier than any argument could have been. At school events, David was front and center. Coaches called him Mike's dad. Teachers addressed him directly. Other parents nodded his way with familiarity. I was the awkward man, lingering by the bleachers, clutching a coffee like a shield, smiling too much to people who didn't recognize me. One day, Emily's friend came up to me during a recital intermission and asked, "Are you Mr. Carter's friend?" "No," I said. "I'm Emily's father." She looked confused for a second. "Oh, I thought David was her dad." I didn't correct her. What was the point? Even their social media joined the narrative. Photos captioned, "Family night with Dad." David, holding popcorn at a movie theater. Proud of our girl. David, with his arm around Emily after a choir concert. I wasn't tagged. I wasn't mentioned. When I posted a throwback photo of Michael and me fishing, Emily sent a private message. "Can you please not post old pics? It makes things awkward." Awkward. Love was awkward. Memories were inconvenient. My presence, even as nostalgia, was a problem. I began to realize they weren't just replacing me. They were rewriting me. The new family unit had cohesion. Clean lines. David filled the gap I had left, and he did it well. Too well. He showed up. He listened. He coached. He supported. He didn't just insert himself. He earned their trust, and then their affection. And Linda, she orchestrated the entire transition like a symphony. And I became a ghost with a checking account. At one point, I tried to talk to Linda. "I'm worried," I told her over the phone. "It feels like they're forgetting who I am." She sighed. "They're not forgetting. They're adapting. You've always been distant, Mark. You can't expect to swoop in after years of being a stranger and have everything go back to the way it was." "I'm not swooping in," I said quietly. "I never left." "You were never really there." That sentence lodged somewhere deep in my chest. It echoed long after the call ended. I started digging through old letters I had written the kids. Every birthday card, every holiday note. I found them all stacked in a drawer in my apartment, still sealed. Maybe she never gave them the letters. Maybe they never cared enough to open them. I didn't know which option hurt more. It struck me then. The cruelest kind of erasure isn't when someone tells you you're not needed. It's when they never even mention your name. That's how you become forgotten. Not by being hated, but by being unnecessary. It was Father's Day. I didn't expect anything. No calls, no texts, no cards. I had trained myself not to hope. Still, a part of me lingered on the day, like someone waiting at a terminal for a flight they know is canceled. That morning, I opened Instagram, as I often did, not to post, but to observe. Scrolling through stories and photos had become a habit. Maybe masochistic, maybe pathetic. Definitely both. Emily's post was one of the first I saw. A bright, colorful collage of photos. Her and David at the zoo. Her sitting on his shoulders at a concert. Him helping her with a school project. Him cheering in the bleachers. The caption read, "Happy Father's Day to the greatest dad in the world. Thank you for always showing up. Love you, David. I stared at the screen, blinking. Greatest dad. Not stepdad. Not thank you for being there too. No nuance. No inclusion. Just absolute erasure. There was no picture of me. No mention. No trace that I had ever occupied that title in her life. I told myself to close the app, to move on. But my thumb hovered over the heart icon, and out of some desperate need for presence, I tapped it. A red heart lit up beneath the post, a digital whisper. I saw this. I'm still here. Less than 2 minutes later, the post disappeared from my feed. I searched her name. User not found. She had blocked me. It didn't feel like anger. It felt like burial. I sat there in silence for a long time, phone face down, chest tight. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just disappeared a little more inside. That night, as I was pouring a second glass of whiskey, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Paul, an old friend of the family who still lived near Linda. Hey, Mark. I don't know if I should say this, but your daughter thinks you moved to Oregon. She told my wife you started a new family there and didn't want to stay involved. Said that's why you're not around anymore. I reread the message 3 times. Oregon? New family? I hadn't even been to Oregon in 10 years, and I lived 15 minutes from my kids. I called Paul. He picked up immediately. What did she say exactly? I asked. She was at dinner with my daughter and some other girls. They were talking about David and how great he is. One of them asked if she ever sees you, and she just shrugged and said, he lives in Oregon now. Got remarried or something. We don't talk. She really believes that? Paul hesitated. It sounded like she did. I thanked him and ended the call, sitting in stunned silence. This wasn't distance. This wasn't awkward teenage coldness. This was a lie. A crafted narrative. Someone had told her that I had abandoned her. Someone had rewritten my absence as abandonment and filled in the details with fiction. Linda. It had to be. She had always been so careful, so poised, so diplomatic. But behind that polished exterior, she'd fed them a version of me I didn't recognize. A man who walked away, who started over, who chose someone else. Suddenly, the pieces snapped together. Why Emily had stopped replying. Why Michael barely made eye contact during those rare meetups. Why David wasn't just the stepdad, but the dad. Because in their eyes, I had left, and I hadn't corrected the record. I had stayed silent, respectful, waiting for things to normalize. But silence can be louder than words when it fills the gaps someone else writes into. I thought I was being noble. I was just being erased. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror that night and stared at myself. Wrinkles deeper, hair grayer, eyes more tired than I remembered. Who was this man? Not a villain, not a hero, just forgotten. And for the first time, I let myself admit it. I wasn't losing them. I had already lost them. I had spent days picking out their gifts. For Michael, a rare, autographed football card from his favorite player, something we used to collect together when he was younger. For Emily, a vintage fountain pen set I found in a tucked-away bookstore downtown. Something elegant, personal, like the one she used to borrow from me when she was still writing stories at the kitchen table. Along with each gift, I included a handwritten letter. Not long, just enough to say I missed them, that I was proud of them, that I hoped the year ahead would bring them happiness and clarity. I wrapped each box with care, tied them with red and gold ribbon, and drove them myself to Linda's porch the morning of Christmas Eve. I didn't ring the bell. I just left them on the doorstep like offerings, tucked beneath a pine wreath that still smelled faintly of resin. That night, I sat in my apartment with the lights off, except for the glow of the television. I wasn't watching. I was waiting. Around 8:30 p.m., I saw the notification. Emily has started a live video. I opened it without thinking. My heart raced. I hadn't seen her face move in real time in over a year. The screen filled with festive light, twinkling garlands, a fire crackling in the background. Emily and Michael sat on the living room floor, both in matching pajamas. They were surrounded by a mountain of gifts. David was there, of course, handing them boxes, laughing with them, wearing a ridiculous reindeer sweater. He had one of those smiles that took up his whole face, the kind that looked real, no matter how much you wanted to believe it wasn't. They opened box after box. Emily squealed at a new laptop. Michael whooped when he unwrapped a signed jersey, also from his favorite team. David high-fived him and said, "Knew you'd love it, buddy." And then I saw it. In the corner of the room, near the fireplace, were 2 red boxes with gold ribbon. My boxes, untouched, unmentioned. My heart pounded as I leaned forward, hoping, praying they would get to them, that they'd open them and at least smile, maybe read the card, maybe say my name. Instead, Linda appeared briefly on camera, adjusting something on the mantel. She looked at the gifts, then leaned in toward Emily and whispered, "That one's from Mark. We'll deal with it later, okay? Deal with it. Like it was a problem, a nuisance." Emily nodded slightly, didn't even glance at the box, and turned back to the camera with a grin. "Thanks for watching, everyone. We love you. Merry Christmas." The video ended. I sat frozen, the screen now black, reflecting only my own face. I looked old, older than 48, older than I should have been. My chest felt tight, not like sadness, but like pressure, as if the room was shrinking around me. It wasn't just that they hadn't opened the gifts. It was that they had hidden them, visibly, made a decision, conscious and deliberate, to ignore what I had offered, to delay the acknowledgement of me until the performance was over. I wasn't even a character in the play anymore, just a name they didn't want to say on camera. I picked up my phone, typed a message to Emily. "Merry Christmas. Hope you like the pen." Then deleted it. I tried Michael. Saw the stream. Hoped the card meant something. Deleted that too. There was nothing I could say that wouldn't sound like begging. That night, I didn't drink. I didn't cry. I just sat in the dark and stared at my own reflection in the black mirror of my phone screen, wondering how much further I could disappear before no one noticed I was ever there. The day after Christmas, I sat down at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and a pen. No phone, no distractions, just paper, ink, and everything I hadn't said for the past 2 years. I started the letter with her name, Emily, then paused. For a long time. What could I write that didn't sound like an excuse? What words could I put down that might reach past the stories she'd been told? I tried anyway. I told her about the nights I stayed up late checking the weather before our old camping trips, making sure it wouldn't rain because she hated the sound of water hitting canvas. I told her how I used to sit outside her bedroom door during thunderstorms, just listening for any sign she might be scared, ready to knock softly and ask if she needed a hug. I told her I remembered every birthday theme she ever picked: mermaids, fairies, outer space, and that I still had the hand-drawn invitations She once insisted on mailing to imaginary friends. I admitted to my mistakes too. I wrote about the missed piano recital, the one where Linda had to send me a blurry video afterward because I was in Denver closing a deal. I acknowledged the summer I canceled our trip to Yellowstone, promising we'd go next year, only to never bring it up again. I confessed I thought I had more time, more chances, more later. And I said I was sorry. Not in the empty way people say it to move past things, but in the aching, personal, gut-wrenching way that comes when you realize the damage wasn't a crack. It was erosion. A slow, grinding fade of presence, memory, connection. 7 pages, front and back. I poured myself into those words. By the end, my hand ached and my eyes burned. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had told the truth. I folded the letter carefully, slid it into an envelope, wrote her name in neat, careful script. Then I stared at it for over an hour. I imagined her opening it, frowning, rolling her eyes, maybe not even finishing it, maybe tossing it on her desk, unopened, unread, next to homework and half-used lip balm and textbooks she never brought home. I imagined Linda finding it first, or David, reading it, scoffing. Look who's trying to play the victim now. Worse, I imagined Emily reading every word and feeling nothing. Not anger, not empathy, just indifference. That's when it hit me. This letter wasn't for her. It never had been. It was for me. It was my attempt to hold on to the version of myself I still wanted to believe in. The dad who cared, who tried, who remembered everything. The man who wasn't a stranger, or a ghost, or a cautionary tale told over dinner with friends. But if I needed a letter to prove I was that man, maybe I wasn't anymore. And if she needed a letter to remember any of it, maybe none of it mattered to her at all. I picked up the envelope, tore it in half, then again, until it was nothing but confetti, scattered like the moments I'd spent trying to hold on to someone who'd already let go. I didn't throw the scraps away. I left them on the table and walked out onto the balcony, letting the cold slap my face awake. In that moment, I stopped thinking like a father begging for acknowledgement and started thinking like a man reclaiming his place in the world. This wasn't about making her see me. It was about me seeing myself again. I sat in the driver's seat of my car, parked outside the coffee shop, where Michael and I used to meet once a month. I hadn't been there in over a year. The windows were fogged with condensation, and the smell of stale takeout still lingered in the fabric of the seats. I didn't turn the engine on. I didn't reach for my phone. I just sat there, staring through the windshield at nothing, letting the silence settle over me like a second skin. It wasn't sadness anymore. Not really. It was something sharper, something colder. Anger, not the kind that rages or screams, the kind that hardens, the kind that comes after too many attempts at kindness have been ignored, twisted, or erased. I had spent years trying to apologize for the father I wasn't, years tiptoeing around my own children, offering them space, money, gifts, anything but confrontation. I told myself I was being patient, understanding, compassionate. But the truth was far simpler. I was afraid that if I pushed too hard, they'd hate me. That if I demanded to be seen, they'd shut the door for good. So I stayed quiet, polite, absent but available. And what did that get me? A daughter who blocked me on Instagram. A son who called someone else dad. An ex-wife who rewrote my story without ever looking me in the eye. That night, as I sat in that car, something in me shifted. The guilt cracked. The grief burned off. And underneath it all was something I hadn't felt in a long time. Resolve. I would not ask for permission to be a father. I would not wait for recognition or validation or forgiveness. I would be the father I knew I could be, even if they never saw it, even if they never thanked me, even if they never came back. Because fatherhood, real fatherhood, is not performance-based. It's not a popularity contest. It's not about who gets tagged in the most posts or who hands out the biggest gifts. It's about showing up. I pulled out a notebook from the glove compartment. I'd kept it there for emergencies, but that night, it felt like the right place to start. I made a list, a simple one. What I will do next. Review every payment I've made over the last 5 years. Document every letter, gift, and effort. Meet with a lawyer, not to fight, but to understand my rights. Start a journal, not for them, but for myself. Reclaim my time, energy, and dignity. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was reclamation. I didn't need to be angry to act. I didn't need to scream to be heard. What I needed was clarity. And for the first time in years, I had it. I started seeing everything differently. The missed holidays, the ignored texts, the carefully curated social media lives. They weren't accidents. They were boundaries, not ones I'd agreed to, but ones I'd allowed. I had accepted exile because I thought I deserved it. But I didn't. I made mistakes. Yes. I worked too much. I prioritized the wrong things. But I never stopped loving them. I never stopped caring. And love, real love, is not erasure. I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The man looking back at me wasn't broken. He wasn't pitiful. He wasn't a ghost. He was a father, a quiet one, a hurting one, but still a father. And he wasn't going anywhere. The first thing I did was cancel the auto payments. Over the years, I had set up a dozen recurring transfers, school fees, extracurriculars, holiday bonuses, monthly allowances. None of it court mandated, just my way of staying involved, staying useful, staying present, even when I wasn't wanted. But after that night in the car, something in me locked into place. Not bitterness, not cruelty, just clarity. I logged into my bank account, opened the scheduled payments tab, and one by one, shut the faucet off. Every single one. I left only the court-ordered child support intact, $2,000 on the first of each month. That was the only thing they had a legal right to. Everything else had been me trying to buy a seat at a table that no longer had a place for me. 2 days later, the first email arrived. Subject line: Summer camp deposit. Urgent. It was from Linda. "Hi, Mark," it began. "Michael and Emily both want to attend Camp Elridge again this summer. Total cost is $1,350 each. We need to send the deposit, $900, by the end of this week to reserve their spots. Can you please send it to my account like last year? Thanks. No. Hope you're well. No acknowledgement of our last conversation. No mention of blocked Instagram accounts or unopened gifts. Just another invoice, dressed up like a request." I didn't respond. The next day, another email came in, this time with the subject, "Follow-up, time sensitive." "Hi again, just wanted to check in. The kids are really looking forward to camp, and I'd hate for them to miss it because of a deadline. Please confirm." Still no mention of the things that mattered. Just money. I waited another day. Then I replied with a single sentence. "If David is their father now, let him pay for their summer." I hit send. Less than 5 minutes later, my phone rang. Linda. I answered on the third ring. "You can't be serious," she said, voice tight. "You're going to punish them just because you feel left out?" "This isn't punishment," I said calmly. "It's boundaries. You've always paid for camp. You said it was for the kids." "I used to believe it mattered," I interrupted, "but clearly it doesn't. You've made it pretty clear I'm not part of their lives, so I'm stepping out of the financial ones too." She went silent for a moment. "They're your children, Mark." "Are they?" I said, because from where I'm sitting, I've been replaced. Emotionally, socially, publicly. You can't have it both ways. You can't erase me and expect me to keep writing checks like I'm an ATM with no feelings. This is about them, not me. "Exactly," I said. "So maybe it's time their new father steps up." I ended the call before she could respond. The silence afterward wasn't peaceful. It buzzed in my ears, sharp and unsettling. I knew there would be fallout, accusations, maybe even legal threats. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a man reclaiming his dignity. That weekend, I cleaned out my storage unit, found bins filled with receipts, art projects, soccer trophies. I took pictures of everything, then donated most of it. Not out of spite, but because I needed space, physical and emotional, for the life I had left. I called my lawyer on Monday. "I'm not looking to fight," I told him. "I just want to make sure I know my rights moving forward." We reviewed the custody terms, the financial obligations, the language in the divorce decree. I wasn't breaking any agreements. I was simply choosing to stop going above and beyond for people who no longer saw me. It felt strange at first, like removing a cast after months of healing. There was soreness, stiffness, but also freedom. I had been carrying weight for so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand tall without it. Linda didn't reply to my last email. Emily didn't text. Michael didn't call. And for once, I didn't chase the silence. I never planned to go public. For years, I kept everything bottled up. Every slight, every silence, every moment of erasure. I told myself it was private. That airing it would make me look bitter, or worse, pathetic. But something shifted after that phone call with Linda. The words rang in my head for days. "You're going to punish them just because you feel left out?" Like I was the villain in a story I didn't even write. Like they had the narrative, and I was just background noise. A convenient punching bag who also happened to foot the bill. So I opened my laptop and started typing. Not a letter, not a legal threat, a story. I created an anonymous Medium account. I titled the post, "When Your Kid Calls Someone Else Dad, and You're Just the Wallet." The first sentence set the tone. My daughter blocked me on Instagram after I liked a post where she called another man the best father in the world. I'm her biological dad. I've paid every cent of child support, bought every birthday gift, and watched every milestone from behind a glass wall. I'm not bitter. I'm invisible. I wrote for hours. I didn't name names. I didn't lash out. I simply told the truth. How I had become a ghost in my own family. How I was praised for being generous, but never acknowledged for being present in the only ways I was allowed. How modern co-parenting sometimes becomes silent exile, especially for fathers who made mistakes but never stopped trying. I ended with a question. At what point does a father stop begging to be seen and start reclaiming his dignity? I hesitated before hitting publish. Then I did, and I went to bed. By morning, the post had over 10,000 views. By afternoon, 50,000. By the next evening, it had been shared across Facebook, Reddit, and parenting forums I didn't even know existed. Hundreds, then thousands of comments flooded in. Fathers writing, "This is my life," word for word. Mothers confessing, "I never realized how easy it is to erase someone quietly." Adult children saying, "I didn't know how much my dad was hurting. I'm texting him right now." Some were angry, others emotional, many just stunned. The post wasn't polished, it wasn't dramatic, but it was true. And truth, raw, uncomfortable truth, hits differently. A week later, I got an email from a local parenting podcast, then a call from a radio producer, then a message from a national men's health magazine. They wanted interviews. They wanted to hear my voice. And for the first time in years, people weren't just reading my story. They were listening to it. I went on one podcast, then another. I kept my identity anonymous, but I spoke clearly. Calmly. I didn't blame. I explained. I talked about the subtle erosion of fatherhood, about how the legal system still assumes silence equals safety, about how many fathers are too ashamed to admit they feel disposable, because society tells them their only job is to pay and shut up. One night, a clip from a radio interview went viral. Just a 30-second snippet. Being a dad isn't about having the title. It's about showing up, even when you're locked out of the house. The comments poured in. Linda didn't say a word. Not to me. Not publicly. But I knew she saw it. The views kept climbing. My inbox filled with messages from strangers. Men in court battles. Women apologizing to ex-husbands. Teenagers asking if it was too late to reconnect with their dads. What started as a cry into the void had become something bigger. A movement. And though I still had no reply from Emily or Michael, I finally felt something I hadn't in years. Heard. The legal notice came in a crisp white envelope, delivered by certified mail. Notice of petition, emotional distress, and defamation. Plaintiff, Linda Carter. Defendant, me. I read the document 3 times before the words made sense. She was suing me. According to the claim, my anonymous blog post and subsequent media appearances had caused emotional harm to the children, disrupted their sense of family stability, and damaged their mental well-being. There were mentions of cyberbullying, of slander, of psychological manipulation. She accused me of turning the internet against her and David, of endangering the kids' privacy, and, ironically, of weaponizing public sympathy. It would have been laughable if it didn't sting so deeply. I called my attorney. "She's coming at you emotionally," he said, flipping through the scanned PDF. "But we'll counter with facts." So we prepared. And when the court date came, I showed up, clean-shaven, calm, and quiet. Linda sat on the opposite bench, flanked by her lawyer and David, who wore a navy suit too tight for his frame. He looked uncomfortable, like someone who finally realized a camera had been turned on him. When the judge asked Linda's attorney to speak, he went straight for sentiment. He played a short clip from my podcast interview. He called himself a ghost, the lawyer said. He described being erased. Then he released a viral article with veiled references to his children's names, their stepfather, their school. It led to online attacks, threats, unwanted attention. The judge turned to me. "Mr. Walker, how do you respond?" I stood. "With context, Your Honor." I handed over a thick binder. Inside were printed emails, dates, timestamps, and all of every unanswered message I'd sent to Emily and Michael over the past 3 years. There were screenshots of holiday gifts acknowledged with silence, letters returned unopened, and bank statements showing voluntary payments far beyond court requirements. I submitted a timeline. Each weekend visit I had requested, each one canceled. Most often with one phrase, "They're not up for it this week." Then I dropped the final piece, a series of text exchanges with Linda, some where she referred to me as not a real presence, others where she declined my offers to attend school events because David's already handling it. And finally, the kicker, a message from an old mutual friend who had confronted Linda directly after the blog post went viral. "You told the kids he moved to Oregon?" Linda's reply, "It's easier that way. Cleaner." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse her of malicious intent. I simply let her words speak for themselves. The courtroom was quiet for a long moment. Then the judge cleared her throat. "I find no legal basis for an emotional distress claim," she said. "In fact, I'm more concerned by the pattern of communication shown here, or rather, the lack thereof." Linda's attorney objected, denied any intent to alienate, blamed teenage mood swings, school stress, miscommunication. But the judge wasn't swayed. "This isn't about who bought what or who said what online," she said firmly. "This is about a parent systematically excluded from his children's lives under the pretense of emotional protection." She turned to me. "Mr. Walker, are you seeking modification of custody?" "I wasn't," I said, "but I am now." She nodded once, then delivered her ruling. Effective immediately, joint custody privileges are to be enforced. Mr. Walker is entitled to 1 overnight visit per week, alternating weekends and shared holidays. Furthermore, both parents are required to attend co-parenting mediation sessions within the next 60 days. Linda's jaw clenched. David looked like he wanted to disappear. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered, drawn by the blog, the interviews, the spectacle. I didn't speak to them, but someone else did. A parent from Michael's school recognized David and whispered to a friend. That whisper turned into a conversation. That conversation turned into a post on the school's PTA forum. Within days, David was quietly removed from his coaching position. The school cited community disruption. Linda's Facebook profile went private. The polished family photos disappeared. And me? I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just sat in my car, breathed for the first time in what felt like years, and opened a blank notebook. At the top of the page, I wrote one word: begin. It came as a text. Short, simple, almost unreal. "If you're free tomorrow, come by for dinner. No David, just us. Emily." I stared at the screen for so long, the light dimmed and the screen went black. I tapped it back on, just to make sure it was still there. It was. I didn't respond right away. I didn't trust it. Not because I thought it was fake, but because part of me had forgotten how hope felt. My first instinct was that it had to be a mistake, a misdial, or maybe a setup. But there was no follow-up, no clarification, no "oops, wrong person," just the invitation. For 4 years, there had been no dinner, no visit, no shared table. The last meal we'd had together was a cold brunch in a sterile diner where Emily barely touched her pancakes and I paid the check in silence. I typed and retyped my response 3 times. Finally, I sent, "I'll be there." I didn't ask why. I didn't ask what had changed. I didn't dare. The next evening, I put on the same navy sweater I used to wear when we had Sunday dinners years ago. Back when she'd sit at the table swinging her feet under the chair, talking about everything and nothing. I drove slow, not because I was nervous, but because I didn't want to arrive too early, or too late, or ruin the delicate balance of whatever this moment was. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw her standing at the door. Just her. No David. She opened it before I could knock. "Hi," she said. "Hi." She didn't move at first. Neither did I. Then, without warning, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. Not a polite hug, not a stiff pat on the back, but a full embrace. Tight, long, real. I held her like I hadn't in years, my hand on the back of her head, her face against my chest. She didn't cry. Neither did I. But we both held on like we needed the gravity. When she finally pulled back, she looked up at me and whispered, "I'm sorry." I nodded. I didn't need details. We didn't talk much that night. Not about the past. Not about what had happened. We talked about books. About how college applications were stressing her out. About how Michael was obsessed with his new drone. She served me spaghetti. Overcooked. Too much garlic. But it was perfect. We ate on the living room floor, watching reruns of some sitcom I didn't understand. She laughed too loud at dumb jokes. I laughed just because she did. When the plates were empty and the show had ended, she walked me to the door. Before I left, she said, "I don't know if I can fix everything." "You don't have to," I said. "This is enough." And it was. For the first time in 4 years, it really was. The message came an hour after I got home. I had just taken off my shoes and was pouring a glass of water when my phone buzzed. It was from Emily. One audio file. No text. I hesitated before tapping play. The recording started mid-conversation. The voices were faint at first, but unmistakable. Emily and Linda. Linda sounded tired, but sharp, clipped, the tone of someone not expecting to be overheard. "You don't need to confuse things now," Linda said. "Just stick with what's worked. David is your dad. It's easier that way. Simpler." "I don't know if it's that simple anymore," Emily replied, her voice quiet. "Come on, Emily," Linda said, exasperated. "He's the one who chose work over family. You remember how he used to miss everything. How many times did you sit by the window waiting?" There was a pause. Then Linda added, almost like a throwaway line, "He's trying to make himself look good now because people are watching. But you know, who's really been there?" The recording stopped. Another message followed immediately. Text from Emily. "I found that saved in my voice memos from a few months ago. I was going to delete it, but I think I needed to hear it again before I talk to you." Then another. "I'm sorry for believing everything without ever asking your side, for thinking silence meant you didn't care. I should have known better." I sat down slowly, the glass of water still in my hand, untouched. I played the memo again and again. Not because I needed proof. I had lived the consequences of those words for years, but because I needed to feel the shift, the weight of truth finally turning in my direction. Another message arrived. "You didn't leave me, did you?" I replied immediately. "Never." Then, "I let distance happen. I thought I was protecting you by staying out of the way. That was a mistake, but I never left." She responded a few minutes later. "Can we talk more? Not just about now, about everything?" I stared at the screen, heart racing, throat tight, and typed back, "Whenever you're ready, I'll always be here." That night, I sat at my desk and opened a new notebook. Not the one filled with court documents or payment records. A fresh one. At the top of the first page, I wrote, "For Emily and Michael, my side of the story. Not to defend, not to accuse, but to tell the truth, finally and fully. Because now, I wasn't writing to be heard by the world. I was writing for the only two people who ever mattered. And for the first time in a very long time, I believed they might be ready to listen."